Now, we are talking about Brexit, and of course we've been talking about how Sir Keir Starmer's waking up in Paris, lucky for him, this morning, but he is allegedly seeking a much better Brexit deal if his party wins the next general election. He says he would not attempt to rejoin the EU or the customs union, but he has promised to try and make Brexit work. But we're asking, do you believe him? Do we really need a better deal with the bloc?
OK, and let's talk about this. Professor Jonathan Portes, who says the real question is, do Europe want to deal with us, really? And Conservative Councillor Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. And Matthew says we need to stop looking back into the past. Professor, could I start with you? And I think you've hit the nail on the head. Does it really matter what Keir Starmer wants? It really depends on what Europe wants, does it not?
That's right. I mean, there is no question, of course, as pretty much all economists have said from the start, that this Brexit deal is a pretty bad deal from the UK's perspective, because Boris Johnson wanted a deal, any deal, and didn't seek to make it work for British business, and that has done significant economic damage. The problem is that the Europeans, the EU, got pretty much everything they wanted out of the deal. They got tariff-free access for goods coming here. They didn't make any concessions on some of the things we would have liked, particularly on services. So reopening the deal is possible to some extent, and there are some things where it could be improved, but it's not clear that the EU, which has lots of other things on its mind, fundamentally wants to change a deal which may not be working very well for the UK economy. It isn't working very well for the UK economy, but is working pretty much all right from the point of view of the European Union.
Why bother? Stop dwelling on the past.
Yeah, well, the EU is 27 countries. There's 195 in the world. And yes, absolutely, the EU got the pick of the crop because, they wanted to punish us for having the audacity to take back our sovereignty and vote for Brexit. But if we want Brexit to be a success, it's about the long term. It's about looking at every other country in the world and thinking, let's get back to global Britain. What can we do there? I don't trust Sir Flip-Flop at all, because he said that he's going to rework the deal, and the EU's gone, non, s'il vous plaît. No, we don't want to redo the deal. And now he's over there in France at the moment. Well, do you know what? Why don't you stay there? Because summer break's over. You chose not to come here to the UK and, obviously try to do the best for your constituents. So stay over there in France and we'll sit here sorting out the government here.
Well, you know what, Jonathan? He's obviously made a political calculation, hasn't he? He obviously thinks that he can still potentially win back the Red Wall with this kind of ticket, because people are seeing, arguably, that Brexit isn't working.
That's right. There is a substantial majority now in the country which realises, even if I think when it comes to it, most people don't want to reopen the debate about whether we're a member of the EU, but there's clearly a substantial majority that's recognising reality that this deal is not working for us. And Matthew's, frankly, unfortunately, Matthew's attitude illustrates why the Europeans won't necessarily want to deal with us. They realise that there's a substantial fraction of the UK, particularly powerful in the Conservative Party, which is more interested in mocking French accents than it is actually in a constructive relationship with our European partners. And when you have, it's a bit silly, isn't it? We have somebody who is an elected representative of the Conservative Party coming here to talk about how we make our economy stronger, how we work our trading relationship, both with Europe and the rest of the world. And those are big, important questions.
If we want to make the economy stronger,
to make fun of people who speak of French accents. It's a bit, it's not surprising in that circumstance that the European Union looks at it and say, well, Keir Starmer may seem like a sort of vaguely reasonable character, but his party won't be in power indefinitely. Do we really want to be dealing with a country where you have elected representatives who
the EU isn't going anywhere? It's on our next door. Look, if we want to get the country going, we need to look at everywhere else. The EU isn't going anywhere. It's on the next door. We'll still be trading with them, but the focus of the world isn't around the EU. There's 195 countries in the world. Why are we focusing so much on this 27? Let's do deals with Asia. Let's do deals with America. We've done Australia, New Zealand. Britain could go global, and that's the problem. We're focusing so much on our next door neighbours. There is no need to. The EU is not going anywhere. So we can have discussions with the EU for as many decades as we want. We need to focus on here. And the problem, if we have Sir Flip-Flop, is who knows what he stands for. He said that he would nationalise public services, then he rode back on that. He said he scrapped the two-child limit, then he's rode back on that. What happened to that £28 billion a year green levy? What he was coming up, gone, scrapped. We'll get there one day. He doesn't know what he stands for, and we've seen it. His audition for Prime Minister has proven why he's the understudy, because he came up with this returns plan the other day. Oh, well, we'll take in about 100,000 and we'll hand you back a handful. How does the maths add up on that? He's been utterly ridiculed this trip around Europe. And as I said, if we want to get Britain moving, we need to look elsewhere.
But Jonathan, what would you want from any renewed deal with Europe?
Well, I mean, those are big political questions, but I think that Keir Starmer, although it's not quite clear how much progress he can make, Starmer is probably being reasonably sensible, pragmatic and realistic by saying, let's start with things where we know the EU has already said that it wants some form of improvement on the existing relationship. So, for example, regulations on health and safety of food and animals.
Giving us more migrants. One of the things he's come up this week was we'll have the returns agreement. You give us 100,000 migrants, we'll send you back a handful. Is that what the British people want? Is that what Brexit was about? More illegal migration?
It's really quite... and I say this sort of illustrates why it's going to be difficult to deal with the EU or indeed with any country when you have elected representatives coming out with something which everyone knows are simply lies.
Well, he said it this weekend, so it's not a lie.
Let me be absolutely. Can I be absolutely clear about this? It will be very difficult to do a deal with migration on the EU, and it's absolutely clear that doing a deal on migration with the EU will not solve the problems of small boat crossings. It may improve them, but it won't solve them. But when people like Matthew talk about 100,000 migrants, these are simply lies and fantasies, and we should simply ignore them and try and get back to discussing seriously what improvements we can make in our trade relationship with the EU, and indeed in our trade relationship with countries in Asia like India, which the government is quite reasonably trying to do now. So there are constructive discussions going on. Keir Starmer could have constructive discussions on improving the relationship with the EU, as of course this government already has with our Return to the Horizon programme, which has been widely welcomed by the scientific community. But unfortunately, when you have silly, as I said, when you have people who simply make things up, as Matthew did just now, this nonsense.
Well, if you read what Keir Starmer said, I'm not making it up. When people like Matthew say something you don't agree with,
I'm not making this up. You two are out of time, but really entertaining listening to both of you. Jonathan Portes is a professor of economics at King's College London, and Matthew Goodwin-Freeman is a Conservative councillor for Harrow with those views. Really appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you.